Hello, everyone, and welcome to our today's BenQ sponsored webinar on controlling color. So I'm glad you could make it today. I know it's in the middle of holidays for a lot of people and a lot of things going on in people's lives, but we share a common passion of imagery, and I'm really glad you're here. Um, it won't be in Spanish. I would love to be able to speak Spanish well enough to do it in Spanish, but I don't think you would find my Spanish very good. We'll do it in English. I might slip a couple of words of French here and there because I've been living in Paris for 30 years, and that sometimes happens. So we have a lot to do today. Um, there are going to be a lot of different tips. Many of you will have different learning um, different learning needs or what you're looking for. Some of you are working professionals in retouching or making images, and some are just looking to improve their techniques on their own images that they're making. Today's webinar is based around mastering color and mostly around skin tones because I think that's one of the areas most people have problems with. In landscapes, you're allowed to have creative license to do almost anything you want, but with skin tones, it's more limited to what you're going to do. So we're going to do some live editing. We're going to use we're going to do live editing in Lightroom, different pictures, and show you just how I do it and how I control things. We're going to do color correction as well as color editing, which is adding creative corrections and a sort of signature to your images. I'm going to go through some of the technical details first, some short videos to show you how you can control colors. We'll talk a little bit about the monitors and the devices to do that, but we're not concentrating on the devices themselves. Today's webinar is more about how to make great images, make it easier for you, and learn how to do it. So I think it's just about time we're going to get started. So is everybody sound good? Let's see. I said, thank God. That's probably thank God that I'm not going to try and do it in Spanish. My Spanish wouldn't be good enough. Yes, and I meant to say, and that'll be in an upcoming slide, we're going to go through the technical part first, and then we're going to go into live editing, and at the end, we're going to do question and answers. So if you have any good, no, if you have any questions, please just post them in the questions, and we'll get to them at the end. We're not necessarily limited to the amount of time, so please ask as many questions as you want. They're all good questions. Let's get started. I'm going to turn off my webcam for a second, and off we go. So today's presentation is on mastering color. You can find me on neilsnape.com, Neil Snape Shots on Instagram, YouTube channel. I have tutorials on how to edit color. I'm a workshop instructor in Paris and Europe, a color imaging consultant, whatever that's supposed to mean. It means that I love imaging technologies and how to get colors right. I've done that for a very long time. And I like fine art photography, so I do that a lot and still can do commercial stills and video. So first, we'll get rid of the technical details. I hope to go over through that very quickly, and then we'll end up with question and answer, so post what you can. So we'll go through source controls at capture. Wait, sound is crappy. Okay, turn down the input. It might be a little bit loud. Okay. Adding style and personalization to creative controls, color controls, where they are, what to do with them, and getting destination color right for printing web. And I'll even show you a little bit about Gamut Duo. Although Gamut Duo is impossible to show you exactly how it works because it's uh, dependent on only the onboard processor in the screen, in the BenQ, not on your system. Okay. Color management is the start of a means to an end. In other words, if you get your color right in the start and when you're editing, then you don't have to worry about what's at the end. If you start to do your color at the end, you have to go backwards and you'll never really find the right point to be. So that's one of the things we're going to stress in this webinar. Your camera LCD or electronic viewfinder is not a color control point. Don't trust it. It doesn't really mean much. It just shows you an image. If you really want the ultimate control in, I'll turn back on the webcam if you like. If you want the ultimate control with your source images, video or stills, you can use an X-Rite Color Checker Passport 2 or other color checker chart. And when possible, always set your white balance for video and for stills if you can. A fallback for any other situation is you use a previously made DNG profile or ICC profile if you're using Capture One. And look to include any neutral source in your references when you're shooting images so that you can set a white balance later. So why the fastest computer, the best lens, and the best model takes a backseat to the most important purchase? It's a wide gamut monitor. If all of your imagery, no matter where it comes from and where it's going, if you can't see the right colors in it, all your editing is just chasing colors all over the place. You don't know what you have. So that's why it's really important to have a well-calibrated monitor that's reliable. I use BenQ because I think it's fantastic what they do. And we'll go through some of the details about what that is going to do for you. Devices needed, I'll just quickly go through the devices needed to do your to make it possible to do a color corrected editing environment, and some of the major features BenQ AQ color monitors make for you, make the best choice for today's editing. So editing control start points with or without CC charts. We'll do this in live and it's probably a lot faster. I'm just writing down what we're going to look at. Essential control share between all editing applications. So it doesn't matter if you use Lightroom, of I don't know, DxO or Capture One or DaVinci or Premiere. All the editing controls are pretty similar with all applications. So we'll just go over what you need to do and how to get you to the point you want to be faster. Temperature, tint, color panels, local adjustment, that's all going to be done in live on real images, and we're going to do that shortly. Default color profiles or custom, that we'll look at in the panels in Lightroom, but it's the same thing in Adobe Camera Raw. Color correction inputs assured when with a calibrated editing monitor. So you can't know what colors you have, and I'll show you that, without having a calibrated monitor. So it's really simple. That's all you need, and it's something that you will really appreciate. Creative color edits. So after you've done color correction, then you start to get into adding creative color, and that's where the fun part starts. And I'll go through a few images with you. So next step, destination color controls, decisions, and recommendations. I'll just briefly go over what to look at when you're sending your images out and where they're going. Video output color spaces. So we talked just very briefly about these type of things. Gamut Duo again. I'd like to show you that. I have a little film, but it's really difficult to show, so I'll more or less talk about it. And if we have time, I'll even talk about a new application that's in just developing now. It's called Paper Color Sync. That's for print to screen matching. The Impossible project of Gamut Duo is actually showing you the differences, because when you do screen capture like a webinar, it can't capture what the onboard monitor processor is doing. So anyways, I'll try and show you the differences. You can do it in different color spaces, and you can show side by side, picture in picture or picture by picture of different color spaces. It's probably best to use two different computers, but I use it with the same computer with the limited selection of color spaces. So first film. Let me show you an excellent I'll turn off my that BenQ has incorporated into the monitor systems, where you can compare different color spaces by two computers or the same computer with dissimilar color spaces. So what I'm going to do is take you through the OSD menus, which are being recorded on a separate camera. I'll turn it down to picture in picture or picture by picture mode, and I will turn it to picture in picture. Now, when you do that, it's going to put a smaller picture into it, and you can make it 3 different sizes. You can move it around on your screen, and it will give you a representation of the same image in full gamut into another color space. Now, this is when it's done on the same computer. If you're using 2 different inputs from 2 different computers, you have more controls than this. So let's go back into our picture-in-picture dialog box, and let's go down and see what else you can change. So you can change into your different color spaces. You can go into sRGB, Rec 709, Adobe RGB, or DCI P3. You can also change color temperature. For example, if I change to 5000K, then it'll give me a print representation on the same picture into sRGB, but we're going to leave it where it was. Let's go back to looking at our images, and I'll show you why. You won't see any differences in the blues because the problem is this is recording into Rec 709, which is equivalent to sRGB, and there won't be any color differences. If you have people in your pictures, it's one of the color controls that you can easily use. So BenQ has this, and it's good for stills and video. So I hope that was clear enough. It's really hard to show you the differences. It's a real joy when you do have a BenQ monitor in front of you and start using Gamut Duo. It makes all the difference. You can watch how your output destination spaces, how they differ, what problems there might be, and what it's going to really look like when it's on somebody else's space. So back to paper color sync. We might get back to that later. It's an application that shows you print to screen matching, and BenQ has a new no, it went by. That's good. So I made a little video. We might get back to that later. So what devices do you need to get front to back color correction done for your monitor's calibration, and also for getting source colors right? A passport or color checker chart of some sort, and you need a display colorimeter, like I use X-Rite Display Pro, or you can use Data Color Spiders, various ones. And what else do you need for your BenQ? If you have a BenQ, you're going to use the proprietary hardware calibration application. It's called Palette Master Elements, and you download that from BenQ. There are lots of videos available for that. I've already done some on YouTube, and so is Art Swansang. Devices supported in Palette Master Elements, as you can see. So most of the X-Rite and some of the data color. The only one that you can't use is Display Studio. It looks the same, but it's not. They don't have the hooks for it. They're all good. They all do a great job. I just happen to, well, I'm an X-Rite Colorati, and I really like the Display Pro, trusty old instrument that's really fast on doing this. So color management from Capture, how do you do it? Well, if you shoot a chart and you're doing production, in whether or not be video or stills, you have to shoot your chart, and then you do your color matching, whether or not be making a DNG profile, or if you're using Capture One, you can make an ICC profile, and you can do color matching function with nodes in DaVinci Resolve. Where's it all go? Well, that's the important thing with all your images. They have to go somewhere. They're going to go into your monitor. That's where you do all your editing. So you have to know what is in your images. The better the quality the monitor and the calibration, the more possibility you have of seeing all the colors correctly displayed without colors breaking up. I'll show you a little bit more. Oh, that's my favorite monitor, and they won the TIPA award for it. It's the SW321C, which is the monitor that's on my right side, which you cannot see, but it's a monitor I fell in love with. I really don't have the space for it. I do have a 270C, which would fit better, but once you see the 321C, I just can't put it away, even though it's not really reasonable in my space to be using such a beautiful big monitor. So grays, what do grays do for you? And you could look at this boring chart of a grayscale at the bottom. Well, grays are the basis of neutrality in your system and your images as well. So when you have a good gray um, levels showing on your monitor, everything should fall in the right places. And that's why all of the calibration software, including the hardware calibrations, are based around getting the grays right first, and then the extremities of colors, they're measured after. So it's really important to get really good grays. Now, why does that make a difference to you? It's the separation in the shadows as well as the highlights. So on a webinar, I doubt that you can see all the different separation levels, but the separation levels are when you have a difference of L0, L1, L2, L3, etc. That's in the shadows, and then the highlights are L 95 and upwards. When you have really nice graduations, it means that your image doesn't have any banding and it's just a lot better. When the grays are right in the monitor, then that means that all of the rest will fall in line. So everything's based on grays and then the colors come after. So you can look at different charts, and if you can see all the different nuances in a gray chart, it means that everything is good and it means your colors are right. Um, and you can get this type of perfect separations with the BenQ Monitor using Palette Master elements. Whereas if you're using, even if it's a good quality IPS monitor, you'll have, it's a lot more work, if not even not possible to get the fine graduations. So graduations are the steps, and yet if you see a linear graduation, you don't want to see any banding. So that's the differences. So the BenQ Professional SW line monitors, they are all capable, even from the very first um, monitor that I had, the PT 2700, is fully capable of providing everything you need in color and is very consistent between monitor to monitor. Whereas some of the other manufacturers, when they change monitor lines or even the monitors, they change the colors around. So with BenQ, it's been very consistent between all of the monitors. Neutrality, history, and gray levels, well, you have to look at an image. And when you look at an image, it's hard to say what is gray. So you have an eyedropper, you can pick it up. If I would have shot a gray chart, then I would have been able to just click on it and that would set the white balance. But you don't necessarily want all your images of skin tones to be neutralized. So you want it to live in the space that it is. So that's why you have the possibility of looking at histograms. And I don't know if you can see it, but the lines, they're different peaks. So you have blue on one side and red on the other. Those are the differences of what is going to build into the grays. So the gray should be, all of the lines should be together, and then anything that goes outside, it means it has color. So skin tones are not gray, so it has color. So that's why you see a lot more reds in here. Skin tones are basically built with reds. So there's a little shortcut in Lightroom, if you didn't already find it. It's called J, and that shows you those little tiny triangles. I don't know if you can see my mouse on your screen. Those little tiny triangles, then they show you what went blue in her hair. That means it's clipping. So that's why gray levels are very important for your editing, even when it's in color. Again, a picture. So what is the right gray? Well, nobody could tell you what is the right gray. So if you don't have a calibrated monitor, there's no way that you can easily achieve an assurance in your color editing in your images. So as shot on the left, it was that's the raw image, and on the right, so it was balanced, gray balanced. Probably I clicked on the background somewhere, and um, and you can apply a profile, ICC profile or DNG profile, and even improve your color. So which is the right gray? Well, that's really a question that's up to you. There is no such thing as a perfect gray when it comes to skin tones, because you have to let the image live where it was. So there could have been reflections with different colors. Maybe your skin was not exactly right. So when you do color correction, what you're trying to do is get the whatever should be gray to gray, but then you leave the skin tone to live where they want to live. Um, Same thing for video. It doesn't really change. It's just a little bit more complicated with video because you're not often shooting raw video. You're shooting encoded video. So that's why every time with video, you have to do a white balance before at the beginning of a clip and usually after a few clips later. And that will help you to set up your white balances. But you can do it easily with a color checker passport video. And I'll go through that like okay. Source controls at Capture, Lightroom DNG, there's a little tiny module that's built into your... I want to show you the fastest and easiest way to getting excellent color from your cameras from raw images in Adobe Lightroom. When you install the X-Rite Color Checker Passport application, there's a tiny module installed into your Lightroom exports that's going to take charge of exporting the image with the correct orientation, the correct type of chart, and everything that's concerned with making a DNG profile from that chart picture. I'll show you how it's done. Let's just make sure that we have nothing added to this. So we go to Develop Settings, right click, Reset. Now there's absolutely nothing done to this image. When you shoot your chart, X-Rite is actually changes very little between white balance settings, so that's not your concern. Make sure that your chart is exposed correctly, that you're not overexposed or underexposed, and that will make the biggest difference. So all that you have to do for this, I could right click, export, find my color checker camera calibration here, or I will show you the slower way is use export, find camera calibration, and we're going to call this one CC BenQ 77D, and it's not a dual illuminate, that's not done this way, and we say export, and as it's processing the profile, so it's taking into consideration everything it has to do to create a profile, it does the correct orientation, picks the right type of chart, and it has correctly generated a profile from this little image with no user intervention. The only thing you have to do is restart Lightroom and then you can apply it. Where do you apply it? It's here. You go here, you click on here, and you pick a chart that's acceptable. And you can see if I roll on and off, that's the huge difference it makes by using a chart. Do you have to use the chart on each individual image that you shoot? No. And do you have to use it all the time? Not at all. It actually is going to align your capture for having better default color coming in. You can even set it to be your default color profile used with that camera. Simple, easy, fast, and efficient. Yeah, it's really easy. It's semi-automated. It's a background task, and it just puts the profile in the right place. And that profile then can be used. It extends the colors and it aligns the colors. It's not at the extremities. It's actually to align the colors, and that's why you can use that profile for whatever captures you make because it aligns the colors of your capture. It's not all about setting up or correcting color. It's more about extracting the maximum potential color from your source images. That's what works really well. DaVinci Resolve, this will be a little bit longer. Hope that you can understand it. What it is you shoot color checker, either normal one, passport or passport video, and I'll just click on the video and you'll see. It's really easy. I want to show you a fast, efficient, professional level color matching function, which will result in excellent skin tones. Let's go through the steps. It's really fast and easy if you record a color chart in your clips at the beginning and even at the end if there are any lighting changes. Set your white balance to as close as possible to the light source or do a custom white balance. Let's go to the edit page. I've already taken the liberty to crop and trim a few of these. They're all made from this clip, and we're going to use the first one because it's already trimmed in our
color page. So go off to your color page, and it's already defaulted to the last used section, which is the color matching. Normally, if you see the color wheels, you just have to click here. So we're going to turn on the overlay for color chart. In the color chart, we're going to place it on top of and centered on all the patches. The first thing we're going to have to do, though, is to check and that we're using the right passport video chart. And you'll see that the colors then will come out the same as on the other one. Now you can move these around corner by corner or a whole row at a time. So I'm just moving these up. This clip is intended for, say, YouTube. So the source and the destination colors are Rec 709. If you would have used a log profile, then that would be your source gamma. So when I hit match, you can see that all of the colors then are aligned and the deviation is marked. You can see that the gloss patch is actually quite dark in representation, and that's normal because we're going to add another color node. I'm going to turn off our overlay because our color matching function is done. Alt S, another color node, and this one will be our white balance. So I'm going to select this patch, and that will give me a perfect white balance. One more node, and that's going to be to lift the exposures. I keep these separately because there could be variations throughout your timeline, and that way you can readjust them later. Now, let's just take our gain, move that up into a nice enough bright white, and we're going to move our lift, so to lift off the base blacks just enough so we have some separation, and that is our color grade applied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say grab still. Grab still is going to collect up all of these color nodes and make it usable for applying to any other color grade. Now, since we know that this next clip is the one that we're going to use for doing our color skin tones, we're going to say apply grade, and now it has those applied as well. I could go on to the next one and do the same thing, apply grade. Let's go back to check our skin tones. It was on the parade, and you can see it looks a little bit funny. That's because we only have a very similar tone in all three channels. So we're going to go to vector scope. We're going to make sure that show skin tone indicator is on and show 2x zoom. And you can see quite clearly that all of our skin tones line up on the skin tone indicator. That means we have no additional editing to do on skin tones. You have perfect skin tones and you have perfect balance everywhere in your clips. So you can apply this to all the rest of the clips. That's all there is to doing color matching and skin tone editing in DaVinci.
Right. So thanks for bearing with all the technical details. Now we're going to get into the fun part. We're gonna do some live editing. So what I want to say though is that a lot of people think that BenQ is based on just on photo stills editing, but the truth is a good monitor can do both easily and very well. So there are a lot of features that are in BenQ that other monitors don't have. For example, when you have, let me turn on my monitor webcam for you. Yeah, when you have the BenQ monitor, so you have different color spaces that you can turn it to. So when you set up with the system to have an ICC profile, it's actually an ICC profile that has very little information in it, and it leaves the monitor to change everything to its custom profiles. So you can make a custom profile for each different space that you use, and you can change it when you want on the fly because it's actually all color corrections are actually done in the monitor and not in your system. So BenQ monitors are just as good for doing video in DCI P3, which is a very large space, similar to Adobe RGB. That would be for photographers, as well as doing Rec 709 for YouTube or whatever it might be. And you can change this on the fly. So you can always have the assurance that your colors are right for video just the same as for photography. Different spaces, they have different needs, but you have all of these things are in the monitor. So once you have a good monitor, you're unlimited in what you can do with it, especially since it's consistent color between monitors. Anyways, let's see what we can do with the fun part is supposed to be here. Yeah. So off to live editing. Now, I'm just going to escape out of this one, hide this one, and trying to get to Lightroom. It's a little bit funny for me because I have all sorts of screens going on in front of me for the webinar, so it's a little bit different. So I'm going to turn off the sound of the system, and we're going to go into go back to grid. Wait, and we're going to pick an image. So what I wanted to show you is I'll show you these two. But the thing is, I'm looking on my secondary screen, so I'll have to go to this one. So between these two images, they're both raw, but one has color correction, the other doesn't. How could you edit these if you didn't have a good monitor where you had proper calibration? Because I base all of my images on feeling and knowing what's there. So I have to have the assurance of having the right colors. So that's one of the things that I just rely on having the right colors. So I have two monitors. I have an iMac, which is the computer, but it also has a good screen, and I have the BenQ. It's a little bit frustrating knowing that the iMac actually changes colors a lot more often, so it needs more often it has to be calibrated, and sometimes you get banding and other things like that. So it's not as reliable in the end, and it's not as consistent. So your assurance comes from a really good hardware calibrated monitor, like a BenQ, whereas the iMac is the actual screen that I'm looking at, but I can tell you that it's not as consistent. So between these two images, so I changed the contrast on one, and there's not much else that's done to it. So I don't know if I'm going to do this image, but I'm going to show you the difference for feeling. So often they talk about doing gray balancing and using a color checker passport for doing everything. It's not really the idea when you're doing skin tones. You don't want to kill all the colors. You want to let the ambient color live. So how would you do a gray balance on this image if there's nothing gray to click on? Basically, you have to rely on your eyes because there's nothing that you can click on in an image that will give you a gray balance. It's not possible. So that's why, again, if you're going to rely on your eyes, then you have to have a monitor that's putting out the right colors. So that's all done with hardware calibration. So go through these. Now feeling, the difference between these two, as shot, I believe it was that one. And so that's a copy with some increase in contrast. Again, go with your feeling and with your images and what you want. What are the right colors for the skin tones? That's really hard to say. Skin tones are built of reds, but since this is a non-neutral image, then you have to know what you want to do with it. So sometimes I add color into an image to make it a little bit better. Let's go onto an image and actually do it. So here's a finished image that a lot of people liked and has a painterly style. And here is the original. So why don't we start off with this one? I hope everybody can put their hand up and say if they like this one. So I'm just going to hit reset. Reset. There you go. So it's back to the way it was shot. I'm not sure if I can see it. Now, what would I change in this image? I would go up to first things I do, and this I have set by default. So remove chromatic aberration, enable profile corrections. If I was in Capture One, I'd do exactly the same thing. So as a preset in the style. So camera portrait. I don't know. Why don't I see what happens if I apply a Canon 5D profile from a chart? It's better. So that's why relying on your defaults is not always a good idea. Some people complain about Lightroom not having good colors and Capture One is so much better. It's all about the what they do with the default colors when they're coming in. But if you actually make a DNG profile or an ICC profile, it's custom to your camera, and actually the colors then come out pretty similar on all applications. It depends how you see the colors. So by default, they're acceptable. They're personalized colors coming from the manufacturer, and yet you probably want to change that. So this image, what would I do to it? First things I do is, well, I set the profile. Next thing, you can, in this image, you have a gray background. So I could pick up the eyedropper and drop on the background. Did you see the difference in color? It's enormous. So this was using, I believe it was Elinchrom Flash, which by nature must have been a lot more blue than say my brown colors, but it was very easy to do. And yet the other images in the sun, you could see that it was pretty difficult to find anything that was gray. So this image was really easy. Did it affect the skin tones? Yes, it did. And that's why we're going to take a close-up look and see how the colors were affected. Not bad. But what I do, so I've white balanced this. This is color correction. This is not color editing. So I just balanced it. That was very fast and easy. And then I have all my tone controls. Everything else is set to 0. I probably won't start here. Where I start, it's kind of strange. You might like this, you might not. But actually, since I've been using Canon cameras all along, and finally they came out with one that will be almost as good or maybe better than Nikon and Sony. Um, the problem is with Canon cameras in the shadows, they have pretty pretty ugly transitions. So what I do is I go to the split toning and I increase the saturation a lot. When I do that, it makes some horrible colorations. That's just because I want to see, you have to add saturation. When it's at 0, it's not adding anything. And then I'm going to move that over until it's just off a green, and then I'll go back again. So now she's got a little bit green skin or a lot green skin. And usually the numbers in the hue angle is, I don't know, are around 27. And then I'm going to take this one way back. Now, if I want to affect only shadows, which the problem with Canon cameras is in the shadows, is I'm going to put the balance so that it only affects very little in the shadows, and actually it goes more towards the highlights. So then I can correct for that kind of cranky color that Canon has in the bottom end, and I'm going to add a little bit more color into it, but not so much that it's going to color all the gray. A little bit of gray in the background. This is being a little bit more creative edit. So we did a color correction with the gray, and I'm going to add in a tiniest little bit of blue. I could turn it over there, all the way over in the hue angle, and yet you don't see anything. That's because saturation is at 0. So if I turn up saturation to just there, and then I can just adjust a little bit the actual tones. So we added back in a little bit into the highlights so they're not too red. That's pretty much it. And then I go back to here. I'm going to change. I could change vibrance. And in these type of pictures, if you want to make it romantic, you just take down vibrance and saturation just a little bit. It's good. Highlights, you can mess around and play with that. You don't want it too flashy. I think I'm going to go down in highlights. Whites, you can see that maybe overall I'll take it down, and then we'll do some custom editing in a minute. And you can go to your color section. Many different ways of doing this. And since the skin tones are mostly in the lips and things, you can see if I change that. And since she's got freckles, it affects that too. I can make it more creamy, or I can make it darker. In her case, I'm going to make it more creamy, and I'm going to change it to a little bit more orangey. That's all I want to do on that one. Oranges, that's with Lightroom and ACR, that's mostly where all the skin tones live. So you can just see if it's not better, lighter or darker. But when you're using that one, just a little bit will do you well. Yellows is not much. There's a bit of green in the bottom. I'm not going to worry about the rest. What else am I going to do? So now I'm going to go to creative editing. So I'm going to lighten certain local areas. So exposure. I noticed that in her face when I went to, other than exposure, I'm going to go to whites. No, not whites. Yeah, back to whites. And I'm going to just, it's at 11, and the brush is at 94 flow. I'm just going to go a little bit over with the mouse over the whites that are there to make it more alive. What else can I do? In this one, don't think I have to do too much. I'm going to go click on a new pin, and I'm going to take oops, I turned off my brush. I've got a few custom brushes that I use all the time. I just dialed in a bunch of settings and I just know it works. And I'm going to make my brush smaller with the horizontal scroll wheel. And I've got a bunch of settings in there. If you look down, you might be able to find them. It's plus exposure 0.3, contrast minus 30, highlights plus 31, and a little bit of clarity 18. And that's my preset. I mean, it doesn't mean much, but we just lightened up her eyes. You could spend more time going around here with lighten and a little bit of darken. Let's do that for one. A new pin, and we're going to go to exposure, but this time we're going to go down in exposure. I already was last time. So on the cheeks, see there's a little bit of shadow, so I can go out there. That was a bit extreme. Follow it around where the shadows are naturally falling. Sometimes you can give it more dimension by doing this. And that's about it. One more, we're going to do just the hairbrush. And that's just got a bunch of different settings done to it. And we're just about right. And we're going to go to pit to view. And we're going to, that's all, I think. Otherwise, we could go to global. Let's do one horizontal one. And it used the last setting, but it doesn't matter because I can change this at any time to something new like temperature. And on black and white, you can't do this, but on color now they have a new setting. So we're going to invert, and you have a global hue angle. And so I can make it a little bit more blue because blue actually are colors that recede. My computer's getting really slow because it has a lot of stuff going. And I'll make this a little bit bluer. I go in the wrong direction. Yeah. So make it a little bit bluer just on the outsides. So for this one, it's pretty much done. I will just take my one other brush, and it's called Freckles. I'll go up to here, check my time. Oh, gotta hurry up on this. And I'm just increasing just a little bit, and I have a brush that's called Freckles. So one done. That's how you can quickly edit a picture and make it smaller. Trying to make it smaller. Okay, what are you doing to me? And you can go, oops, was in the library already. Good. Any questions on this? Just write them down, and we're going to do one more. Let's see. I'll do one really quick here. D for develop, and I'll show you if you have a chart and you're doing a lookbook or something like that. So if you shoot the chart on this image, I could do export color checker camera calibration. It will pick up on the chart and make you a profile. It's easy as that. Or I can do reset. It goes back to 0, and I can do it manually because we have gray, and you pick one of the patches that has a notch in it or anything that's got some detail. So you could do this for a white balance or this one. Click on that one, and it should bring all the colors into line. And if you apply the profile, then we can, instead of camera face fill, I'll click on this one and go find one. Canon 6D, okay. I think that must be an air-based camera. And so I applied a DNG profile. You can see how fast the colors are aligned. Simple as that. Close that, go back, and just change the exposure just up a little bit. And you're done. So as simple as that. It's really fast and easy, and you can rely on your monitor to actually give you the right colors. One more, if we still have enough time to do it. Show you the difference between two images. That's just a PSD that was done on top. Trying to find one that's a little bit easier to understand. I've always liked this one. This was done in Fontainebleau. There's the raw image, and that was after it was modified with different settings. So let's really quickly go through this. So you can do a white balance. Now, since it was shot in with daylight skylight coming in, it's mostly blue. So you could click on this and click on anything that you think is gray. And yes, it will correct it. So there, corrected it. But you don't know what gray that is, and maybe it was supposed to have a little bit of blue in it. The other thing you can do, of course, is set it to, and it is already set to a DNG profile. So that's one thing you can do to get your colors right. And then you can start to edit the local colors. Now I can see that on her, she's a little bit yellow. So I'm going to actually make the image a little bit warmer. But you can see that if I make the image warmer to make it like the other one where it has green on the outside, then we're going to have to change something. So I'm going to go here. So I added a little bit of, and I'm going to purposely take the tint down. So the tint is the white balance or white points, lights, and it's actually going to make her skin slightly green. But as I was saying, color correction is making things neutral and gray, but color editing is giving it personalization. So it's okay to try it, but you can only know what the colors are if you have a calibrated monitor, because if you try to see colors on a non-calibrated monitor, well, you're just guessing. I don't like guessing. I want to know what colors I'm doing and getting it right in the first place. So then I can go back to my split toning, and I can go green on this one. I don't know. I can go red. I can go green. Whatever I think is right. So there I can color correct a little bit for skin tones. That's fine. Change the balance that way. Um, Highlights, I'm not going to change anything there. And I'm going to go back to this one. I'm going to draw a highlight around this, and it was set to freckles, so I'm going to go to temperature. Now, I don't know if I have to invert this. Yes, I do. So I'm going to click on invert, and I'm going to make this a lot more blue and green on the outside. And I can even turn off this one. So this is what you can do in the new versions of ACR, and you can see that I effectively very quickly added green back into an ellipse that's on the outside. I'm just going to lighten up here with a new exposure. It could be exposure or highlights. It can also be whites. And I'm just going to draw in because we're almost out of time. And it defaulted back. So I'm just drawing around the image to give it a little bit of dimension. You always have to draw in where you find natural light occurring, and not to try to add light where it's in shadow. So that's just following it out. You can draw on whatever you like, and that's all there is to it. I like the little mushrooms in the background, so I'm going to make a new one, and I'm going to go to clarity. Check my time. Oh, clarity, texture. And I'm just going to draw a little bit around those because I like them. They're like bubbles, but they're little lichens that are on the rocks. And even brighten up the grass that's there. Top of that one. This one, and it's done. So if I press, in theory, if I press backslash key, it should go back to before editing. No, it went back to the way it was before I started when I reset it. Okay, so that's it. So back to, my camera is on. That's good. Go back to PowerPoint. So for any of you who couldn't stay for the whole time, there will be a recording of this available. And after that is sent to you by email for registered participants, you will also have offers on the professional line of BenQ monitors, which is a great deal because BenQ monitors already are the best price point in the industry for the quality, and you'll get a little bit more off. Believe me, it's the best you can get. There's some monitors that are not available immediately because of uh, COVID pandemic, unfortunately. But take a look at the monitors that you like, and back to you. So, what questions do you have? Is it going to be in Spanish? No. What did I hear? The Spanish bot is probably your localization. It probably got confused. Thank God. Hi, Neil. Yeah, for XLR microphone, I'm not sure if it's a GoToWebinar or you have to turn the sound up. It's kind of weird. We even had to do a special mix from the sound off the iMac coming back in again for the video because it doesn't take system out audio. How do you know? I've got to extend this one out a little bit. How do you know that your color corrected monitor will reflect the finished product? Um, you have to be confident in the calibrations. There's a validation method with Palette Master Elements, so you validate the profile after it's created. Usually it works out well. It reports back a chart, and it's the same thing as if you use X-Rite i1 Profiler. You can do quality assurance, and you can validate the colors with the difference of colors from what's supposed to be sent out. There are various ways of doing that. You can use one of the things I did not say in the video that I really wanted to say is how do you check for skin tone if you have a calibrated monitor when you're editing and you don't have a gray patch or anything to do. Believe it or not, if you're in a white light environment, say daylight or something like that, you hold up your arm. I think the video is still on. You hold up your arm and you check against the inside and the outside of your arm against your image. And that's actually, I know it sounds silly, but it's the way we've been doing in professional retouching for a long time. Because if you have a calibrated monitor, you can actually be confident in matching skin. The only thing is, though, everybody has different color skin, but it's a very good way of telling if you're close or not close. Lookup tables. Lookup tables, you can make them in Photoshop and you can export them now. So it's Michael, oh, it's hard to say his name, in Toronto. He's really good at that, and he's got some YouTube videos on how to export lookup tables. So he actually sells them as packages of presets. For me personally, I don't really need to do that. I work really fast and efficient in Lightroom. I don't need to. I hardly ever use my presets anymore. Actually, just do it image by image and just apply that to different ones. Um, say that I don't know what that means. Um, yeah, it's everybody. Can you show us modified pictures in Photoshop CC? I'd love to, but as you know, the time in the webinar is limited. I tried to show you a lot of stuff, and I even left out a lot of things that I would have liked to shown you. Um, do I do color editing in Lightroom CC? I use Photoshop for working quickly on pushing pixels around. So anything that's like healing brush or clone stamp tool, which I use to just lighten up little areas underneath. But I don't do it for overall color correction. Personally, I like working fast, and I try to get the images right in camera with lighting or composition design, whatnot, because it is possible for me. It's not always possible for everyone. Photoshop, though, you're already working on an encoded image, even if it's in 16-bit. For the purists, working on a raw image because you have gain controls and the mosaicing in the background that can occur at a different level that is not possible anymore in Photoshop unless you use a smart object. So can you see how complicated it can be to have in a webinar in 1 hour to show so many different functionalities? Um, if it's interesting, I'd be glad to do a webinar with BenQ on what I do in Photoshop for you. Yeah. Photoshop though, I don't use for the actual color editing at all, just because I have all the controls I need in Lightroom. Do I use Capture One? Yes. Um, Capture One has editing tools that are not available in Lightroom that I would love to see in Lightroom. Um, when people get on the side of, oh, Capture One is so much better, I don't believe that. It's not. It's just knowing how to use your tools and what you have makes it either possible or not possible. Um, Capture One has a few tools though that are not available in Lightroom, like skin uniformity, which is absolutely fantastic. So for professional retouchers, if you're doing one-off images like one by one, Capture One is really good at doing that. If you if you if you do a lot of images like wedding photographers, Capture One is not your application. It's really too difficult to do batching. And I really like the round tripping that you do with Lightroom. So I had it in the original intentions to show you how to do two different edits to make a virtual copy in Lightroom and then open that as layers in Photoshop. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do in Photoshop even from coming from Lightroom. So you can play with that and you can blend the images together. So something I'd love to do with you. How is the camera profile created for Lightroom? Mm. We had that really tiny video. So it's basically you export directly from Lightroom, or you can open the Color Checker Passport application, in which case you can actually make a dual illuminate profile. It's really easy. I think I have on my YouTube channel some videos on that, and if not, they're easy to find. Sorry. Hmm. See about viral pictures, some people say. See pink. I'm not sure. Um, Color editing, there it's always a decision that somebody has to make along the line. So like all the cameras have filters. You can apply filters. So it's a question of style, but professional editors would probably avoid filters in that case. Okay, good. Go ahead, turn the sound down. That's fine. Um, yeah, getting sound right for everyone is probably a challenge. Have volume control, but brings in a lot of noise. Presets. Yeah, presets. How do you make presets? I used to love doing presets. I used to make presets often. I have a list that's an incredible long list, and I used to roll over the presets until I found something that's kind of crazy, very different. I've got some presets that are hacks on images, making it posterized, solarized, and reversals and all sorts of things. Pushing the limits is something you can do, and saving them as presets is always fun. I just found that years ago with Lightroom, ACR, and other applications like Photoshop, it was it took some brute force to make an image live. And I find that with the recent applications, that actually it's really um, actually out of the camera is actually quite good with especially if you use say passport profile for it, because it comes out with all the colors that your capture can have. It can be neutral in your lighting conditions, and the controls that you use both in Capture One and in Lightroom are a lot less uh, brute force than they were before. So now I find I don't use presets as much because I actually can get there really quickly through the panels. So sometimes on my YouTube tutorials, I just show how I work through the images, and hope to do some more. So that's why I think making presets, you can make presets for certain looks and apply them later, but I find that since I do so much black and white and don't really need it, I know exactly where I'm going. So each image is individual, and rather than looking for a solution with presets, I just get into it and just play with the colors. Okay, calibration. For proper calibration, color temperature, and user defined. Palette Master Element is really incredible. It's a simple application, but you can apply your own XYY coordinates, unless I made a mistake there, and to anything you want. So it's incredibly simple, and yet you can modify it to great extremes. So if you're an expert in color, you can actually set it to whatever you want. You can change your gamma settings and do that. For most photographers, the most practical thing is either Adobe RGB, which the screens they've always been aligned to close to Adobe RGB, and if not, you can use Panel Native, which has a little bit more color. So Art Swansang, he's gone through a lot of testing. He spends his entire life doing that. So you can get a little bit more color, and which avoids clipping into smaller spaces. But you know, it's how much color do you really need. Most images, though, you have to remember, especially skin tones. Most images in the skin tones are going to fit into sRGB, and so you have no worries. It's only when you're going high color images, and that's why I wanted to show this image was actually just a picture of the screen from a Canon, showing you Gamut Duo, and that's the best I can do. And even at that, I can't really show you because the webcast is done in Rec 709 or sRGB. I'm not even sure, so I can't show you the extremes of color. So skin tones, sRGB is fine. It covers all skin tones. There's nothing, I don't think there's going to be ever a case when skin tones, unless you're using gels of all sorts of colors, where you're going to go out of gamut on colors on skin tones. And yet colors of blues and greens, that's where you get into where you need extra color. So our images, sometimes magenta too. So magenta, really wild images that I've done before with gels and flash, you can't represent the same image on sRGB, and you'll be really disappointed. And that's why using the different color spaces that BenQ has built into the monitors, so you can change to them and you can do different calibrations for them. It gives you an idea of what it's going to look like on output, which is usually disappointing. What do you do for output destination space when you're printing? It's best to set it to whatever the printer requires, or most online printers, they require sRGB. So you set that in your develop presets. In the monitor, though, you can actually have a different calibration. So you have 2 or 3 different calibration slots with BenQ, and you can actually set up a separate print to screen matching calibration, which is usually around 5000K or 5500 at a lot lower brightness level, and that way you can have a screen to print match when your print is in a viewing booth, which is a lot, it's not so bright as say daylight. So that's the way. The problem is most people have problems with their prints looking dark, and they're not really dark. It's the monitor itself is too bright. So BenQ, you have 3 different calibration slots, so you can have different calibration slots for each different use, which I use. And the same thing is for people doing video. They can have one calibration for DTI P3 and then another one for X709, for example. Yeah, D65, D55, D50. D65 is by far the standard I would use, and it's the standard I currently use. Years and years and years ago, when I was doing pre-press, and I did a lot of pre-press, drum scanner, etc. So then I would use D50, but that's because all the viewing booths were D50. That's what makes it a little bit hard, because these days everybody relies on D65 and they're not used to seeing D50, so it always looks a little bit too surprising for them with the changes. So D55 is fine for print to screen matching. I wouldn't use it as an editing space though. It's not going to be good. One of the video editing spaces though, I think is a reduced intensity in there. Okay, got it. Thanks. Okay, if you're looking to print work, but the printer is used has no ICC profile, can you use an ICC profile or paper similar? Not really, Kevin. It's best to leave it in a standard space and send it to the printer and have the printer do the color management, so it'll pick up the what they call lookup tables on in the printer. So it's not the best way. ICC profiles are usually better if you have no choice. Yeah, because if you pick a similar paper profile, that paper profile was built for the time and the condition the printer was in on that day. And that's why if you ever have the luxury of making your own custom profiles for papers, uh, you have to update them often enough or do printer calibration. So some of the bigger printers like HP and Canon and Epson, professional line printers, you actually recalibrate the printer to have a standardized print output, and then you do a profile after that. So then all you have to do is redo the printer calibration, which is not a profile, but is a printer calibration, which aligns the colors. Then the profile is still valid. The big print shops like the labs, they do that every day. Do we have other videos like this? Not yet. Um, I have some on my YouTube channel, but I'll be very happy to do this again with BenQ. I said that. Yeah. The thing is, we all see different colors. So even what's on your screen will look different in perception to different people and different ages and different time of the day and your environment that's around you. So the best thing to do is have a really well calibrated monitor that you can rely on that doesn't change much throughout time. So if you see the variations in tracking on the BenQ, actually you'd be surprised. You don't have to calibrate that often because it remains very consistent. Can you do better? Yeah, but the monitors that do better cost 3 to 5 times as much. So I don't think it's a problem, but you do need one that's reliable and consistent from day to day, and more or less from hour to hour that you can rely on. So what color is a dress that's blue? Well, it's the way your mind puts together the image, and but the base of the image is viewed into a portal for your imagery or videos, and so that has to be on a monitor that's consistent, reliable, that you can count on. Yeah, I don't know which picture that is. Um, yeah, when you're watching a webinar, don't count on the colors that you're seeing. It's nothing. It's I think it's like in 4-bit, 4 bits of color or something like that. Does the angle of viewing a monitor influence something? Um, IPS monitors, they have a stated viewing angle of 100 and 172 degrees, I believe, or 178. But it's not really true. If you walk around different monitors, even the BenQ monitors, it depends on the particular monitor, the type of color change that you'll have. But you can easily get 120 degrees viewing angle where the density and the color doesn't really change. It also depends on the backlighting of monitors, if it changes or not, but that's why it's really important with monitors. Do not buy anything that's not for editing, that's not IPS, and preferably a matte screen. Matte screens introduce their own questions though, because matte screens, they have to have a certain type of backlighting, so there can be bleed and other things, but it's not really a problem. The last two SW line monitors with BenQ, they have not only uniformity control, which is really cool. It adjusts the colors on the, or not the colors, but the density on the panel, so you get a lot better uniformity. And they also have a new coating that's super velvety and doesn't have the same problems most matte screens have in like having halos around the screen. So once you see it, you have to see it in real, but it's just so fantastic. You just fall in love with having this matte screen that's in front of you. It looks like a print in your hands. Um, is it better to use HDMI or DP? No, well, actually, it's, I would say, definitely better to use DisplayPort, or even better yet, use USB-C. Just because with USB-C you have data communication as well, so it just means one less thing to do. And if you plug it in your editing monitor, it happens to be latest Asus or I iMac iBook, no, MacBook. I've had them for years. Yeah, with USB-C, because it powers your computer as well. So it powers 60 watts. So if you have really like a 16-inch MacBook Pro, there'll be times if you're running applications really hard that it won't be charging, but then when you let it idle, then it'll go back to charging. So it's a good system. Are there any other questions? Do you have to calibrate a printer? Do you have to get for colors as a monitor? Um, Printing is a whole nother subject. It's yeah. I mean, you could make an entire webinar on it. You need to calibrate a printer if you can. Otherwise, you have to go to the lab that calibrates them as well. And if you have your own home printers, then use the ICC profiles that the printer maker, not necessarily the printer maker, but the paper or printer manufacturer have made for that particular paper. And usually that works out really well. With this new paper color sync application, so they have the small Canons and small Epsons. Both of them are very competent printers, and they have new print to print screen matching functionality. It's really cool, and maybe I'll have to show that another time. So I want to thank you very much for staying with us. We all share the same passion, and it's a wonderful field to be in photography. I like everything that you do, and have a very good summer. Stay safe, and see you again. Thanks.